As the first Black Human Rights Commissioner for the Western and Northern Cape, what do you think counted more in your favour, your qualifications or your struggle credentials?
They were definitely my credentials, in the sense that I started the Gender Equity Unit at the University of the Western Cape in 1993 to advance the position of women and women students at the university. But that was the culmination of a long history of activism in the women's movement. I think race also played a role in a way, in that the commission, the first commission consisted of 11 commissioners, and they had to have a balance of race and gender. So I won't discount that. I was probably an affirmative action appointment, but I never see myself as an affirmative action appointment, because I think I can compete with the best in the world.
Growing up as a coloured person in the Western Cape, what do you think of Jimmy Manyi's statement that there are too many coloureds in the Western Cape?
You know, it sounds like a declaration of ethnic cleansing. There are too many coloureds in the Western Cape, so we must distribute them around the country so that they can disperse and become less of a minority, which they already are. So it's ridiculous. Nobody says there are too many Zulus in KwaZulu-Natal, or there are too many Indians in Durban. It is a deeply racist statement, and I think we should condemn that kind of language in the new South Africa. People have a right to be where they are. That kind of statement also doesn't take account of the origins of the coloured people as descended from the Khoi and the San and the slaves who were imported from Madagascar, Indonesia and elsewhere. The ANC has yet to reckon with the origins of the coloured people. And the coloured people is a kind of a fly in the ointment for the ANC for a number of reasons. And there is a great attempt to negate their resistance struggles as part of the greater struggle for democracy in South Africa. So Jimmy Manyi is quite unaccountable and plainly racist when he says those kinds of things.
There is a case going on in the Labour Court between Correctional Services and Solidarity. The state argues that because coloured people enjoyed more privileges under the coloured Labour preferential policies and the tricameral parliament, that they should forego certain privileges now. Are they excluding coloured people now and perpetuating the racial hierarchy?
Firstly, that argument really unsettled me, because the questioning itself, for me, reflected that the state wants to maintain the racial hierarchy and be punitive towards coloured people for the apartheid government's divide and rule policy. The divide and rule policy worked because there was a hierarchy of privilege. So in order to co-opt coloured people to white South Africa, they did give them certain privileges, like the coloured Labour preferential policy, the tricameral parliament. But more black people participated in homeland governments than coloured people participated in the tricameral parliament. Around 4% of people participated. I was one of those monitors who monitored the tricameral parliament, and there were more police than voters. So to punish coloured people for participating in the tricameral parliament is to negate that Africans participated in an apartheid structure, namely the homeland governments. So that's point number one. Point number two is the preferential coloured Labour preference policy, the tricameral parliament. These were all attempts to divide and rule. If the apartheid government's objective was to divide and rule the oppressed, namely coloured, Indians and African, is the ANC attempting to perfect what the apartheid government has introduced? Under the new constitution, we are all equal before the law. And the Constitution says that the state must make provision to make everybody equal, not to perpetuate the racial hierarchy. The struggle against apartheid was precisely to flatten that hierarchy. And I'm annoyed that I am now inserted into a racial hierarchy again. That is what I fought against. That's what many people fought against. And I think that we should fight against it. And I hope in the Labour Court we win that case, because it will set a precedent that the ANC government can no longer privilege one group above another.
How do you think South African leaders should go about redressing the affirmative action issues? Is it too late? What can they do?
I think it's too late, but people are going to do it anyway. And if they're going to do it anyway, then they better do it properly. So, for example, if I were the affirmative action officer of a university or a government department, I would see what skills base is necessary for my department to run smoothly and to deliver the services that people need in the country, and I will appoint accordingly. So, if we need at the local government level, we need sanitation and waste management, electricity, I would appoint engineers. And if we don't have black engineers, I will appoint white people, because white people were privileged under apartheid, and therefore we should use them to use their privilege to build the new South Africa. We shouldn't be punitive, because white people are equal under the law as everybody else. Many people in America has taken the government to court on affirmative action and won. Here, we're not a litigious society. Here people just get angry, but they don't take test cases to court. Now, if I were a parent, I would have taken our government to court. I would have taken universities to court a long time ago to test affirmative action. Where, for example, at UCT, white people need to attain higher points to get into the medical school than black people who might have had a private education. You need to be very clear what it is that you're trying to address and how are you addressing it. And if people find loopholes in the system, they will take you to court. And the Americans don't wait to do it. But the wonderful thing about that is they have set precedents, and you cannot as easily exclude people on the basis of race any longer in America. Malaysia dumped affirmative action because it boomeranged in their faces, like ours is boomeranging. We have black economic empowerment, which has created a highly upwardly mobile elite, instead of it being broad-based economic empowerment. So I call BEE black economic enrichment. I don't call it black economic empowerment, because what we have created is a small sector of elites who drive Maseratis and Ferraris and you name all these luxury cars, and they live in grand houses, but nothing is filtering down. And that makes people angry when they see the state's resources not equally redistributed around the country.
Rhoda, in your opinion, has human rights issues deteriorated in South Africa in the 15 years since you resigned as a commissioner?
On many scores they have, and I'll give you examples that are completely unacceptable in a modern democracy like South Africa. We've had corrective rapes in the township where a lot of black lesbians were raped by men who feel that they have a right to correct their sexuality. That for me is a scourge, that black women who make sexual orientation choices have to live in fear. Secondly, we've had a lot of vigilantism in our communities because the rule of law is breaking down. When people lose faith in the police and in the enforcement agencies, they take the law into their own hands. Thirdly, I think on violence against women and domestic violence, we are failing. We've got the best constitution in the world with regards to women's rights. We even included that women have a right to be free from public and private violence. Lo and behold, a lot of women are still beaten by their partners because people still think it can happen within the privacy of your home. And then lastly, if there's one thing that really upsets me, is the 23 young men who died over the weekend from botched circumcisions. Can you believe in this day and age that initiation happens all over the country? Allegedly, these are health centers set up to deal with initiates, and you are supposed to have a medical practitioner on site. In Impumelelo, there was no medical practitioner on site. The traditional leaders are being placated because they are an important constituency in the election. So government will not allow the equality clause to trump over cultural rights. It's the other way around. Customary law trumps the equality, and so people die. So we have a woman minister, an MEC, who says, it's tradition. There's nothing I can do about it as a woman. The traditional leader says, only God knows who's going to die. And I wrote a column about it today, and I said, no, Mr. Minister, even we know who is going to die, because it happens every year. So on those, I'm only mentioning a few, not to speak of what's happening in the prisons, okay, where a huge percentage have HIV and are TB patients. So we don't do rehab in the prisons. Those people leave prisons and they infect communities. So if I were a human rights commissioner, I would know exactly what to do. Unfortunately, in our Human Rights Commission, our Gender Commission, these are cadre deployed political appointees, and they earn whopping loads of money, and the issues of the day are of secondary importance to the salaries that they earn. And that is an indictment of our society. You know, we can't keep on bragging about this constitution. We have to implement it and we have to enforce it.